Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of connecting with Ward Bassett, CEO of Bassett Salon Solutions, based in Anaheim, California. Ward is one of those entrepreneurs that didn't really even know he had that leaning until timing and events presented themselves. As you will hear, he can tell a story, not some far-fetched tale, but a story that really ties together elements from his life and how they shaped his leadership and vision. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSequel Distribution Software. InSequel is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSequel Distribution Software at www.insequel.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right, Ward. Hey, thank you so much for coming on Distribution Talk. It's great to see your face again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Jason. This is exciting. I've been listening to a few of your broadcasts, and it's been really cool to learn about you and what you've been doing. So it's exciting to be here, honored.
Oh, it's been a fun process, my friend. It's a brave new world, we have to evolve all the time. So no, this has been a good medium, and I'm glad you enjoyed some of the previous episodes. I wanted to learn a little bit about how you got involved with distribution, and it sounds like it also crossed paths with your hobby as well. So please give us a history lesson if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of a crazy story. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. I had a father that was a high school dropout, and he started with his hobby, which was basically welding mufflers for cars. And back in the late 60s, he started welding headers for boats. And so if anybody that's listening to this might be a river enthusiast or had jet boats back in the day, he started a company called Bassett Racing. And so Bassett Racing went on to be the dominant manufacturer of exhaust system for boats in the United States. So he became very wealthy at a very young age. I always say I grew up with a silver spoon in my mouth. We ended up manufacturing bicycles, water skis, and the boat headers.
Yeah.
So my childhood was unbelievable. I mean, I really, most people, you probably sit back and go, wow, from the traveling. I mean, how many people took family vacations to Hawaii and the deserts and traveled, but we did. And of course, we traveled the country. My mother had show horses, the Arabians, and we had acreage of properties, and we would travel around. I got pictures of me and Wayne Newton at shows and, all this stuff when you're a kid. And he sponsored motocross teams as well. So he had some sponsorship stuff that was going on, and we traveled the country with these motocross guys. And so it really intrigued me, right? I wanted to be that guy that raced motocross. Yeah. So I started at a young age. I spent my early years on the bike. I started riding when I was 4 years old. I started racing when I was about 6. By the time I got into my teens, I was traveling the country, racing motocross. I never held a job, really. That was my job. So even by the time I got to high school, the job was to train, race, travel. Did I do okay in school? Yeah, okay. Yeah. But I was trying, this was going to be the career. Now, it wasn't necessarily going to be motocross forever, but racing was my livelihood. My parents divorced when I was young, about 11. I guess I was about 11 years old. So that was a little bit of a weird dynamic because, you got this, this business that was running. You still got this family that's kind of intact with 2 older brothers, but not really. We were just doing our thing. I stayed involved with Bassett Racing. The business was going along fine. I thought, okay, I'll just be kind of a part of that and do this racing. And, as we develop, I was learning. Traveling with my dad, I really kind of learned how to work with people, right? The guy had this just ability. I mean, he had people all across the country that just admired him. He had made so many people money, and I'll never forget his business advice to me. He always said, he says, help people get what they want, and you will always have what you need. And I just never forgot that. So it was always about getting people the tools that they needed to succeed. And he would always have what he needed, right? So it really seemed like easy advice at the time, but man, it was so profound today, right?
Sure, sure.
And so going to trade shows. And so I really had this kind of young, weird growing up that most people probably just would never be around, right? So you're getting talking lessons, you're going to school for all kinds of public speaking and, the things that go along with it. Well, on my 19th birthday, a couple of days after, I get a phone call from the office. And it's one of my good friends from high school that we had hired to work in the warehouse. And he says, I don't know how to tell you this. I said, what? I'm on my way to the river. He goes, your dad's dead.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? And to come to find out, he was murdered in his home.
Ooh. Oh,
so
man.
Take the silver spoon out, throw it on the ground, stomp on it, kick it into the gutter. Good luck, kid. So, 19 years old. I've got no college education. I didn't say barely, I got out of high school, but really I didn't have anything to really turn on. So racing wasn't going to be an option at that point. I had two older brothers. They weren't going to spend, all the company's money on me going racing anymore, right? That's not going to be an option like my dad would.
Sure.
Racing's not a poor man's sport, right? As they say. Right. You want to make $1 million in racing, you go spend 10 million.
You start with two, right? Yeah.
So I really didn't know what to do. And so Jason, I dove into the business and I took over the water ski side and, I failed with that. I ended up selling the water ski portion of the business to a guy in Colorado. But my life was kind of a mess. Any money he left behind, I blew, having a good time and partying and those kind of things. So that money was gone. All of a sudden I'm like, I'm broke. I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. I'm still trying to mourn through my father, my best friend, right?
Yeah. So
I found myself, of all places, in a karate studio, and I started teaching karate. Mm-hmm. And when you're a racer, you're not very humble. Let me just put it that way. That's not right.
Right.
Park your grandma on the fence, right? I mean, this is how racing is. And so that humility really wasn't in me. Kindness was, but not the humility. But going into karate and understanding the karate studio and understanding I became an instructor and I ran dojos. And I was teaching everything from 4-year-olds to 80-year-olds and learning that humility. And during that process, I was making $400 a week. I'm throwing front punches and kicks and teaching and doing all these things. And I was there from Monday through Thursday, 12 to 9, Fridays from 2 to 8, and Saturdays from 8 to 4. That was my life in those four walls for that period of time. And it really taught me about humanity, understanding of people's problems and struggles and what we have to do to help teach them to get along in life, right? I mean, it really is an amazing place to be if you understand the martial arts. During that time, I was getting my hair cut by a guy. I happened to walk in one day and he says to me, hey, did you see my assistant? And I said, no. And I turn around and look, and it's some girl I went to high school with. And she's all, hey, I'm so glad you're here, right? These high school connections.
Sure.
She says to me, hey, Pon, the guy's name, he's doing a hair show in a couple of weeks and he needs a male model. I said, what's a hair show? Right? It's one of those things, right?
Sure.
She says, yeah. I said, yeah. So you need a hair show? I said, okay. So I go to this hair show on a Sunday. He puts me in a suit and tie, which I don't think I've ever had on before. We go out on stage. He's got a cape around me. And I just walk out on stage and I'm looking around and there's 300 women, right? I'm just like, what did I just watch? This is awesome.
I'm down with this. Yeah.
I'm down with it. He starts cutting my hair on stage. And I noticed that as he would speak, the crowd would kind of lean back. But when he cut hair, man, his hands were like magic. So after he was done with me, he goes, hey, I got 3 more classes to do today and I got 4 more to do tomorrow. And I said, oh, okay. I said, hey, what do you do? And he says, well, I teach academies, right? And he had a brochure there. I said, look, I'm okay public speaking here. Why don't you give me your brochure? I'll get up on stage with you. I'll talk about your academy while you cut hair. He goes, you do that? I said, yeah, why not? I got nothing else to do. I'm here. Got me to tie, right?
Yeah. And look, I've got a really nice looking audience, so I'm really okay with this.
So that's how I started to put my foot in the hair care business, was by doing these pitches for him in the show. And at that show, right, you talk about timing and places to be. And I think that's going to kind of be you'll see as we go along in this conversation that timing is an interesting piece of luck in people's lives, and sometimes you don't realize it. But as I was up on stage, there were some people in the audience who had no clue who I was, because I wasn't from the industry, never been in the industry, had nothing to do with the industry. So, they didn't know who I was from anybody. So I'd walked off stage and some guy was in the back, and he comes up to me and starts talking. And so they start chatting with me, and I'm like, "You guys enjoy the show?" And he says, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, he's from England. He says, "Hey, yeah, mate, why don't you come sell shampoo for me?" I'm not selling shampoo, right? I raised, I'm a karate guy and selling shampoo. I took his card and laughed and, threw it in my glove box or whatever. Didn't think much of it. And it was probably about 2 months later, I went out on a Saturday night and had a great time with buddies, and was probably not feeling really good on a Sunday morning, right? And I'd rolled over in bed, and I'm literally living in this box. It's like a 250 square foot, no kitchen, refrigerator only. It had a deck with a barbecue on it and a toaster oven. That was my kitchen, right? And I leaned over, and that card, I have no idea to this day how it got here, but his business card was like stuck to my forehead, right? So I pull it off, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man, I should probably just call this guy. Yeah. And I called him on a Sunday of all things, and he answered his phone. I said, "Hey, I'm interested in this job." And he says, "Well, why don't you come down and see me?" I go, "Where are you at?" He goes, "Carlsbad." And I'm like, okay. Well, can you be here tomorrow at 9? I go, "Sure." Well, I didn't have enough money to put gas in my car to get to Carlsbad. So I had to borrow some money at the time. Gas was $1.30, I think. So I drove down there and told me about the opportunity. And I said, well, I got nothing to lose. I'm tired of these four walls I was in. I was over my father's death. Not that you ever get over it. I still cry today, but, especially it's unsolved, right? It's an unsolved mystery. So these things are troubling, but I took a chance. Yeah. And he loaded my trunk full of samples, Joico samples at the time. Joico was rocking. He gave me a territory that was literally my hometown here in Orange, California. And I started walking into salons, Jason, and I couldn't believe what I was walking into. It was a bunch of people I went to high school with that became hairdressers. And I'd walk in and they say, "Oh my gosh, Ward, what are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm selling shampoo now." And of course they would just look at me like I was, "What do you mean you're selling shampoo?" I said, "Well, I don't know." But what they did is they put their arms around me and started to help me. And they taught me about the business, and they taught me about, what it was like to be behind the chair. And so I would spend my time learning the business more than selling. Mm-hmm. And so I had this opportunity to really sell them shampoo, yes, but learn the business. And as time went by, I got pretty good at it. A year went by, and some things didn't work out with that previous distributor, and I was okay with that. And of course, the entrepreneurial spirit came out, Jason. And here's where, here it goes sideways. I find this salon that's doing these things. I call them hair machines, but what they did is they process color like 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh, look at that, man! You could do color in no time instead of 30, 35 minutes. What they did is they created ozone inside the lid, right? So it was just pure oxygen. So I contact this guy and I said, "Hey, what are you doing with these?" He goes, "Oh, I sell them for $29.95. Do you have a distributor in California?" He says, "No." I said, "I'm going to be your distributor." So I get on a plane and I go to Phoenix to go see him. And I said, "How many do I have to buy to be your exclusive distributor?" Right. Sure. Right? Yeah. And so he goes, "Oh, you got to buy 10 of them." And of course, I didn't have any money. I said, "Okay." I said, "I need one of them just to go learn how to sell it." It's September. I get this one. I spend the entire month of October up in the Beverly Hills area. Figured if anybody's going to rouse me, it's going to be the people on Rodeo Drive. Sure. So I went up and took a month and learned how to sell these hair machines. And I leave there, come back down to Orange County. Now, mind you, I'm buying these things for $14.99. I'm selling them for $29.95. I lined up a guy in New York that would do a $1 down, $1 buyout lease and approval in 15 minutes. All I've got right now is a Ford Explorer. So I've got this thing loaded in the back. I'd walk in a salon. I'd spend 3 to 4 hours there teaching them how to use the machine. And I would sell them on the spot. I sold 19 of those things in the first month, Jason.
Fantastic.
I landed, right? I landed.
Right. This is it. I'm here. Yeah.
I fixed every single one of them 2 or 3 times in the month of December.
Oh, no.
Right? So this
Yeah.
whole thing's going sideways on me. I'm thinking, what did I do to myself? Right? I got to get out of this business. This business is nuts selling hair care products. This is stupid. I don't like this business.
Right. Right.
So January comes, and this person that was a Joico client had bought 2 of them. She calls me up, and this again, these are these timing and issue things, right?
Right.
I walk in to the salon to go fix this thing. And I'm in there, the hat on backwards, t-shirt and jeans ripped. I got no job, but I'm keeping my word, right? That I was going to take care of this person just no matter what, right? I'm not making the money now, but I'm going to keep my word. I go in there and I go fix this thing. And as I'm fixing it, I hear behind me a woman say, "Hey, aren't you Ward Bassett?" I turn around, look, and I go, "Yeah.
What do we got here?
What do we got here?" She says, "I don't want to sell against you. I want you out of the territory." And I look at her, I go, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Why don't you come work for us?" And I said, "Well, who's us?" And she says, "I work for a company called Maley's."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, at the time, I said, "Well, what's Maley's?" They were only here for a little while.
Right.
And I just said, "No, I'm getting out of this business." And she says, "Well, I'm with a Paul Mitchell consultant right now." She goes, "Why don't you just come have a beer with us when you're done?" Okay, sure. I'm into a beer.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
They knew what to say.
I know what to say.
Yeah.
And so I went across the street, met them in this little restaurant. We started drinking beer together. And the next thing I know, I'm like, man, maybe I should give this industry one more chance. Maybe I overlooked it. She goes, "Well, you got to call my boss." And so I called her boss, Susie Bechtel. Susie Bechtel goes, "I want to meet with you." I meet with her. And she goes, "Well, now you got to go meet my boss." I go, "Who's my boss?" She goes, "John Maley." I go, "Who's John Maley?"
Mm-hmm.
So I go to meet John Maley, and that relationship from the very beginning, I mean, we were friends at first sight. It was crazy. You know, I went on to work for John. That time with him was monumental because, you know, when you think about going to work for somebody, especially when you're an entrepreneurial mind, like, what can I learn here? Not just what can I make in money wise, but what can I learn from this guy? And I thought, you know, when you talk to John Maley, you're the only person in the room. And so I went to go work for him, and we had not a small company. We were probably below the 20 million mark at the time. I think there was only 35 sales consultants at the time. And we jumped in full force. I took a territory with him. I took the worst territory he had, and it was the only territory open. And I said, "Give me the worst one you got." Nobody wanted it.
Right.
"I'll take anything. I'm broke."
Sure.
So I jumped in with him and, you know, ran that territory and had some great success, made some great partners, took his programs, implemented them in the field. You know, at the ripe age of, I think I was 27, he decided to make me a sales manager, which probably should have been the death of me.
Right. Right. Typically is for really good salespeople. So yeah.
Right. And I took over the team I was a part of, which is even worse, right? So now you're going to manage your peers. And those peers, out of the people that were employed at Maley's as a sales force, the 9 people that I was going to take over, like 6 of them were in the top 10.
Right. Right.
Like, oh my gosh.
What are you gonna do with this crew?
What am I going to do with this crew?
Yeah.
But through the coaching of John, I mean, he'll tell you, he goes, you know, he looked me right in the eye. He goes, "I didn't think you were going to make it as a manager the first year." And honestly, leaning back to the karate years is what really got me. 8 or 9 months, I'd forgotten about humility. But month 12, I went, humility. This isn't about me. This is about them. This is about what they want. Right. And so I really dug into the belief that if I can help these salespeople get what they want, I'm going to get what I need, back to my father's advice. So that's what I focused on, and ended up going on a 5-year run of plus 20% growth every year in that territory. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And Redken was on a high, and Maley's organization was going berserk. I mean, he was acquisition after acquisition after acquisition. I mean, I want to say it was 13 to 17 or something like that in a very short period of time. We went from that 30 some odd salespeople. Now we had 300. There was 4 of us that were leading the sales team. I mean, it was a monster. You know, we were covering 7 states. There was 1,200 employees at the time. There was 100 some odd stores. You know, it was a journey that, you know, there's no way you're getting that kind of education in college, right?
Right. Oh yeah. especially at that speed as well.
And he did something that was really unique. John decided, I forget what year, it might have been 2000, 2001, that he was going to bring in some people from outside the industry that understood business, that understood distribution, understood finance, understood warehousing, understood store operations. All of a sudden, I recognized what John was doing. Most people would say, oh, he's bringing in outsiders and it's changing the culture and the company.
Right.
And because we're not the same company as we were when we were 2 million and 20 million, we're $200 million.
I see so many people would try to run their companies like it was still that $20 million company. And it just drives everybody crazy, and you start seeing a lot of gaps. And frankly, they get themselves in trouble, financially.
That happens a lot. And I tell you, being on the back seat of watching that, it was the best thing that John ever did for his company.
Yeah.
It really smoothed things out. The amount of energy that those guys put in to making Bailey successful, you knew they were dedicated. One of my mentors now became Ron Hoke, who was the CFO. I used to sit in his office and he would say stuff like, we made it this year, we did this. And I started to understand the P&L and balance sheet of distribution. So I didn't have to go through the process of trying to learn that in school, right? No implementation. Like I could see it happening in front of me. So the office would close at 5, man. If I was in Valencia, I'd stay an extra hour just to sit in his office and listen to him and understand what decisions he was making and why and how they were affecting things through the organization. And he also had this saying, it was always in January, he'd go, yep, I paid for myself this year. Right. And he would say, hey, we were expecting 7% profit and we came in at 8, right? And so he always felt like as long as I was paying for myself, that always rang true. So when I hire people today, right, and I think for your listeners, always look for that person, if you can, that wants to pay for themselves within your organization. If they're not, that's challenging.
Yeah, it's great advice. Absolutely. Yeah. You can have a whole lot of idea people. Yeah, unless they're paying for themselves and they're actually putting the rubber to the road, it's going to be money. It's going to be resentful money spent. That's the thing, and it's always going to stick in your craw. Like that was not the greatest decision,
Right.
And how do I get out of this one? So,
and how do I get out of it quickly?
Right.
How do I get out of it quickly?
Yeah.
And so you were asking me about how did I put my shingle out there?
Yeah. How did you extricate yourself from Mailey's and get into your own business?
That time with Mailey's was 10, 12 years of something that nature. Obviously, I learned a ton, staying close to Mike Sizer, understanding warehouse operations and writing down everything I learned from him and finding books that kind of supported what they were doing so I could reference back and sitting with, I really didn't want stores. That really wasn't in my game plan at first, but stay close to Wayne Taylor, and stay close to Ron Hoke and understanding that side of the process. So I had enough information. The other information that I had was the acquisitions.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I was watching John take away the small distributor, and he was doing it at a rapid pace. So at the time, there was Cosmoprof and there was Mailey's. I mean, those were the two competitors, and they were both doing acquisitions, and they were both doing them quickly.
Right.
I mean, John would buy a distributor that just covered San Diego. We would pick up those brands that were only available in that county. So that level of distribution was basically gone. And I knew it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, well, timing really. If the Mailey's family still owned Mailey's, I'd probably still be there. I'd have never done this because you wouldn't have survived. But in July of 2007, harkens back to January, right, when we saw that acquisition happen, but the L'Oreal company bought Pureology. When that happened, we simultaneously obtained the rights to another L'Oreal brand called Matrix, which I'm sure you've heard of. So now we had Redken, the L'Oreal Majorelle brand. We had Matrix, and we had all of a sudden Pureology, all underneath this umbrella of L'Oreal, which put them at 70 or 80% of our revenue was coming from one company.
L'Oreal, right?
And at the time, Pureology was on this fast track. So we get to July, and of course, they make the announcement on, I believe it was July 15th. We all sat in that room, and they made this announcement. And right then I got a letter from the CEO of L'Oreal Worldwide to take home and share with my wife. And I sat it down on the table. I've got 3 kids in diapers. My wife is a hairdresser. The 3 kids are sleeping. I lay the letter on the counter. Total silence in the house, Jason. And she reads this letter and she looks up at me and she says, "These people don't care about me." And she wasn't speaking as my wife. She was speaking as a hairdresser.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, "Wow, do you think the hairdresser is going to be left behind?" And she goes, "I don't know." She goes, "But I know you could do it better." And I said, "Well, what do you think? Let's go."
Yeah.
And so we did. And that night I put a plan in place and we were going to go. We were going to go November 30th, basically right after Thanksgiving. We put that plan in place and we started literally in November putting the warehouse together that we borrowed from a friend of mine that loaned us a little corner. And we flipped the switch December 3rd and started Bassett Salon Solutions. And my first day at work was an email. And I just happened to be, I'm still on the email thread. And we had picked up a brand that was in the Maley's house at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the first email that I read that morning on the first day of business, Operation Annihilate Bassett Salon Solutions. so
Well, okay. Yeah, game on.
So I went, I kicked the 600-pound gorilla right where it counts, and guess what? They were coming after me. Oh man, it was a scary moment.
Sure.
I had taken a life savings to put into this program.
Yeah.
We were going in. There was no turning back now. There's nobody else is going to hire me. Can't go back to L'Oreal corporate and say, "Give me my job back." Right. We were moving forward, man, and there was no turning back.
Those are defining moments right there.
Defining is right.
Yeah.
But we did some cool things right then. We said, we're not going to sell to beauty supplies, which at the time was a very contentious fact of the world of salons in California. It was millions of dollars in business. And all I knew is that they were getting discounts. The salons weren't. They could offer 20% off coupons to get the salon customers to shop there.
Yeah.
And never even take a margin hit. The salons couldn't compete. So I'm going to do something different. We're going to focus solely on salons and stylists, and that's going to be our niche. But it's not just a niche. It's going to be who we are from here on out, which came up for the health and wealth of the hairdresser.
Yeah, absolutely. The tagline there, I mean, I think, honestly, I was thinking about this earlier, that this really goes back to talking about that advice you got from your father. It is, what can I do to get them what they want, and that's exactly where it came from. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Little nuggets that you took from time. And,
yep.
So we stayed focused really just to help them. So the health and wealth, right? So, the health side is we're providing products that are healthier for them to use behind the chair and or the environment. That's what that means.
Sure.
The wealth side is we're going to do everything we can to get 100% of the American family's beauty budget to go through salons. And so that's where we've sat, and that's what we've done. And I think a lot of times companies, they get off track, right? Or they'll say, hey, we need a new vision statement.
Right.
And so, we've had our board meetings here and everybody's around and all the leadership's in, and we got to work on a new vision statement. And of course, I let everybody say everything they want to say. And then I go to the blackboard and open it up. I love the blackboard, not the whiteboard.
Yeah.
I go up there with not really chalk, but you can imagine the chalk sound in people's ears. I'm writing it, for the health and wealth of the hairdresser. Let's make sure that we stick to our vision, but all the decisions we make go back to this.
Right.
And if we stick with that, the mission statement, the vision statement, it is all for the health and wealth of the hairdresser. So let's make decisions that are good for those two things, and all else will follow. It didn't need to be complicated. That's where we've stuck for now. It's 13 years since 2007, and it's played well for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you all have, expanded dramatically in those years. You learned the acquisition from Mailers and really understood that world. And, acquisitions are not always the easiest thing. You get some good, you get some bad, you have to mix it up a little bit. So now, by the way, how many acquisitions have you done in the organization?
No, we've only done one.
Okay. The one back, what was that? 2017? Is that right?
2017. It's kind of interesting. If I look back, would you do it again? People ask me that all the time. Would you do it again?
Yeah.
If I was in my 30s, yeah, probably, because when's enough, right? It's like the billionaire. They always say, well, what's the billionaire have that you don't?
Right.
Well, what the billionaire doesn't have that I have is enough, right? So when I went through the decision to go up into the Northwest, we'd been playing up there for a long time anyway.
Sure.
But when those guys called me, the owners of Weiss, they called me and I said, yeah, let's sit down, let's chat, So it was risky for a couple of reasons. It was kind of a culture shift because our culture was so much different, limited lines. We weren't in the nail business. We weren't in the skincare business.
Mm-hmm.
But we went in there knowing we wanted to be in the marketplace. We wanted the store locations so that we could narrow them down and make them Bassett stores over time. We weren't in a hurry to succeed and we weren't in a hurry to fail.
Right.
We were just tracking along. We knew it was going to be a 5-year gig. It wasn't going to be walk in, turn it over like we did at Maley's. I should have learned a little bit more at the end, the way he went in and examined the business, really doing the due diligence.
Yeah.
We did our due diligence, but there were things that because we haven't done little small acquisitions, not that it was huge, but it was a good size acquisition. There were just things that we didn't know to ask.
Yep.
We didn't know to uncover. And so you bought a 2-story house, right? When I was looking at the house, it was 1 story. When I bought it, it was a 2nd story.
Right. Right.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so you get in and you start to uncover and you find these things. You go, well, that's not like, I don't want that. And I don't want it. So it took its toll, for sure. Let's talk about the stress level and,
distraction.
Stretching. Did I do the acquisition properly? If I had to do it all over again, would I do the acquisition? Yes, but I would probably do it differently.
Sure.
I'd have gone into the market different. We certainly had some ego going in, like, oh, we're gonna change everything, right? Don't make it fast.
We are the conquering horde that comes in, and right.
And so we're gonna be the saviors of all up there,
right?
And you've mentioned in the past, Jason, people go into regions that they shouldn't go into, or it's not that we shouldn't have gone in there. It's that we probably could have continued on the path that we were on before the acquisition and been in the same place we are today.
I think sometimes we kind of forget that humility lesson, right there. And the ego runs, just rampant. Oh yeah, I got this. I've had success here. Oh, I remember getting my backside. I got kicked in the teeth in Utah, Denver. I mean, I've been kicked in the teeth all over the place, It's just, it's just those educational moments. And then you step back, go, well, and frankly, that's what I do today is I share some of those stories. And like, if you can learn anything from my pain, here it is right here.
So, I mean, like I said, no regrets whatsoever, total learning. We're still up there. We're still doing great. Because of COVID, it ramped up some of the decisions to close down stores and go down to 2 stores. There was 20 up there. We're down to 2. We'll probably add another one back in Portland as we gain momentum and things open up. We're getting more narrow. We're only hair care brands again. So, what looks from the outside like, oh my gosh, this whole thing fell apart. And then sometimes you go, yeah, but you really don't. We're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. That's not what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to be Bassett. And I think we make that mistake in distribution a lot is, we look at a distributor, oh, they got some new toys, right? A new brand or a new software system or so. You can't see the back end, but, we do that in distribution, right? We say, oh, well, my competitor's doing it, so I have to do it.
Right, man. Their e-commerce site is just beautiful. I can't wait to throw money at that.
Right. But sometimes that's forced upon us by our partners, right? I mean, we have manufacturer partners and they start talking about another distributor doing X and you're like, oh, I got to do that. You can't see the cost behind it. I think John was really good about that too, right? It's like, with John Maley, he would see some other distributor, and because of his CPA background, he'd see some distributor doing something remarkable, and everybody's talking about it. And so he'd go visit that distributor and he would dive in deep and bring it home and get all excited about it and tell us all about it. For instance, an education center, he wants to build something big or do this or do that. And then he would start looking at the numbers and say, yeah, that's probably not good. He would halt it before it ever got into a financial mess, right?
Sure.
And he certainly had his failures here and there, but for the most part, he was quick to see that that's probably not a place where I'm going to put my money and not go down that path.
Yeah. Ward, it's interesting. I grew up really believing the sales side of distribution ran distribution. It was the salespeople and it was that sales drive and that sales directive. But the older that I become and the longer I've observed different kinds of companies, I've come to respect the financial side. That CPA mind, that person who can dissect it rather unemotionally, can dissect these problems and really, as I said, come to respect that and really realize that is pretty crucial to the success of these organizations.
Yeah, big time. We don't have an in-house CFO. We've got a CFO coach, which I did on purpose. Very unbiased to the business, isn't worried about a paycheck, really gives me the hard knocks of the financial side of it so that, I can stay focused on, getting the sales side, getting the numbers where they need to be. But if anybody, is running their own business and they're below that 10 million mark in distribution where you really can't have a $250,000 a year CFO, get yourself a true CFO coach. And usually, you can find those kind of people that are CPAs that work with $100 million or $200 million organizations. Man, it's a cheap investment to have them really pull your numbers once a quarter. You sit down and, really have them examine where you're failing, where you're doing great. He's been awesome through COVID, really helping me understand the cash flow, where we're sitting right now, the details. Okay, don't make that decision, make this decision, and get comfortable. So you're not making emotional, bam. You have to make tough decisions like we did. Right? Got to lay off the entire sales force in one shot, close the stores, lay off. We went from 150 employees, Jason, down to 11.
That's quite the contraction right there.
It was within a couple of days. Now we're hedging back over that 100 mark again, right? And so we survived because we're financially strong, because we live debt free, because we've done a lot of things financially that I love, because I always say I don't run my marriage like a business, but my wife and I run the business financially like our marriage, right? Everything is debt free. We don't borrow money. And so we don't do that here either. Really being understanding of the finances and what you're dealing with is key to me. It's easy to get sidetracked. Oh my gosh, I don't know, no money's coming in. I only have this money in the bank account, not looking at the receivables coming 3 days down the line. You didn't have to make that decision, right?
Right.
So it seems like simple business, but it's easy to ignore when we're emotionally involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, that emotional side kicks in and rational thinking sometimes just leaves the door. It goes out. And
right?
I've had several clients work with contract CFOs, and it's absolutely something I would recommend. In fact, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs, I truly believe that first major hire is that financial side, especially if you tend to be more the marketing, sales driven individual. That complementary individual is so critical in the early stages. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he's been with me since day one. He was actually my CPA when I was racing motocross, right? So
no kidding.
How far back we go.
Right. Okay.
He just happens to be a phenomenal, like I said, CFO coach, works with some amazing organizations that I get to learn from. And that's the other thing, right? Is because he's got that experience. He's with some $400 million company 2 weeks ago discussing things with COVID. I literally took the lessons from what he was teaching them and implement them back in my business as far as things that we just needed to do. And it was really cool. The other thing we probably do, Jason, especially in distribution, because we don't want to disrupt our relationships with our vendors and our customers, is we keep people even though it's killing us.
Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah, you keep locations. Oh, I had a discussion with a friend of mine, and he worked with a private equity firm, and he would be placed in a company, and again, a distribution company would head that. And we talked about how we would hang on to these locations or people for at least 6 months longer than we should have. And it's just like that relationship that you hang on to, and it's not good for you. But you just think maybe it'll turn around. That's exactly what some of those locations are, and individuals are in your organization, that you just emotionally hang on way too long. So
Yeah, yeah, especially in trying times, right? I mean, if we
yeah,
start looking at P&Ls, you're looking at this thing, you're going, okay, I'm losing money, I'm losing money. Okay, at some point you have to make those difficult decisions to retract or pull back. And I see it time and time again, not only in distribution, but and obviously businesses that we might coach, salons, they hold people for whatever reason. Usually it's because it's a personal relationship. They don't want to make that decision. So they lay awake at night, turning, sweating,
oh,
blood pressure, right? And
yeah,
all that
oh
stuff,
yeah,
sick to your stomach. I think that that's an important lesson people need to really come from, not just from COVID, but moving forward. It's like,
yeah,
you've got to run a profitable business. It's oxygen. Profit is oxygen for your business, right?
yeah.
It's the oxygen of the body of your business. And without oxygen, it dies. And so there's too many things that we tend to, want to be good people, but good people doesn't mean keeping people to break the company. I mean, you actually might be doing somebody a favor at sometimes to part ways with them and then go on to bigger and better things. So, don't always think it's such a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult, especially if you come from a smaller entity and then you wind up getting larger. Sometimes you keep thinking as that small entity, and you have to, unfortunately, you have to change your thoughts a little bit, and hanging on to that one or two people could jeopardize the 35 other families that, or whatever the amount is, that depend on you. Like it or not, you have to make that tough decision.
Yeah. Yeah, and we used to think that way too, right? When people would come in, they always want to how many employees you have, like it's some type of benchmark of how
Right,
successful
right.
you are, right? But when we looked at 100 employees, I always looked at it like, okay, my responsibility isn't 100. Most of these people are in a household of what is it, 4.3?
Yeah.
They're all depending on those monies coming
Right,
in to feed their families. It's like we've got
right.
500 people we've got to take care of.
That's absolutely right.
So you have to make tough decisions sometimes, but you have to make decisions in any case. If, to
Yeah.
not make a decision is making a decision as well. So, it's not easy.
No. Before I let you go, I ran across a YouTube video, that you did a number of years ago, and it was, around the motocross world, but it was around an organization that you feel pretty strongly about. Would you mind sharing about that?
Yeah, sure. We actually were introduced to child help through one of our previous vendors relationships with Euphora. And Child Help USA really kind of hit me hard. I love kids. I think that too often children are in bad places, right? And
Yeah.
so I was involved with a motocross series called the Marty Tripes Works Revenge. And I asked Marty one day, I said, hey, look, I want to sponsor your event. So I was helping him with the
Mhm.
actual finances of the program, right, by form of offering some cash. But I said, the only way I'm going to do it is that Child Help USA is the sponsor of recognition, not Bassett Salon Solutions. I don't care that it's Bassett, but the Child Help USA's. And your job is to raise money for them during the event. So we had auctions and those kind of things.
Right.
But Child Help USA is an organization based out of Arizona, and they've got child help centers throughout the United States. If you know anything about child abuse, it's rampant in the United States and around the world. They say right now that, and I'm sure it's worse with COVID. I can't even imagine the statistics that will come out next year. But 5 kids die every day in the United States from child abuse every day. That's every month, a
Yeah.
727 going down every month with, 150 kids inside the plane. I mean, that's literally what we're saying. And so, we use that example just to give people some thoughts on, wow,
Sure.
this is a problem. And those are the deaths. Think about the beatings. So Child
Right.
Help actually has a hotline. You can call them if you, I believe it's 800 Child Help, but they have a line that the children can just call and get help. They can get removed from the home and taken to child help centers.
Mhm.
They actually have one out here close to us in Beaumont where kids can stay a day, a week, a month, a year. They can go from there to foster care to adoption if they need be. the parents could get help, the kids could get out of child help centers and go back home. So they do an unbelievable job of assisting and helping kids get out of really dangerous situations. Why is the motocross thing something that child help kind of resonated with? Growing up, I had a very supportive father, right? And so, yes, we were there to win. Yes, we were there to practice hard. Yes, we were there to train hard. Yes, we were there, money invested. We were traveling, time, energy, sponsors. If you look at my jerseys, right, there's logos all over the place. And people always say, well, why do racers always have these logos? Because they're paying the bill.
Yeah. So, this is expensive. This is not a cheap endeavor.
Right. And so all these sponsors have stuff that are involved. And so there's a lot of pressure to be in those situations. Well, sometimes parents don't quite have a forgiving attitude towards their kids' ability to either win, lose, or train, or those kind of things. And so what we saw as I was growing up, there were a group of parents, and every year we'd be back at a place called Ponca City, Oklahoma, where they had the national championships for amateurs. And that group of dads, at the end of the event, they had an award, and it was called the Rubber Hose Award. And they basically would give it to the dad that was the biggest jerk of the week. And it just stuck with me during the years, because you would see that dad berating their kid if they didn't win, or they fell and didn't get up fast enough. And I'd watch the helmet slaps, and we used to travel these things called box vans, which are basically in the back is a mobile shop for your motorcycles and your gear and all your stuff. And we travel those things, and we would line them up side by side, and I'd be in the back of a box van, and the guy next to me, I could hear the dad, slamming the kid against the wall, or hitting the kid, or screaming and yelling. And you're just like, man, it's just like, this is what it's come to, right? And so you see that in sports.
Oh yeah.
Sad.
Yeah.
And
so, I've seen it with my kids growing up. I mean, it's, and you just shake your head and you're like, oh, really? What? Why? Why?
Why?
Yeah.
And in motocross, you're so tough. You're taking the beatings, right? You're never going to call a child help. You're never going to go down that path. But hopefully, when we did something like that, it kind of opened the eyes to some of these folks that are out there that sports is sports. I mean, my dad said it best: you're never going to race motocross till you're 80. You're going to be done with it when you're 20s. You've got to think of something else to do at some point. And so, he never had this. Did he want me to be a champion? Sure, he did. Did I realize that dream? No, but he just never put it to where his hand was on the back of my face, or the back of my head, or my face, or, there wasn't a belt out. There wasn't the rubber hose, as we like to call it. And so child help meant a lot to me, to be able to see that organization and see what they do. It's pretty cool. And like I said, if you want to get involved, very easy. You just look them up online, Child Help USA.
We'll make sure that, we provide links in the show notes.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. What a fantastic story. I really appreciate you being willing to share everything. Man, I'm looking forward to watching your success, over the coming years. It's been a pleasure every time I run into you at one of the PBA events. I really love that organization. Again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate you. I appreciate you doing the show. I'm looking forward to your success with it as well, and being able to see future things. I really love it when we can listen to people from outside our industry and the struggles that they have. We may be different, but we're still the middleman. We still have two customers, which is our actual customer that buys from us, and the customer we call the vendor. We're always trying to please them both, right?
That's right. Selling up the chain, selling down the chain. So,
That's right.
All right, my friend. Well, be well.
You too. Thank you, Jason.
All right. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz of the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by Connected Peers Organization. CPO is a new organization dedicated to providing fast-paced monthly networking opportunities for industry peers. To learn more about how CPO can bring solutions to your role, visit us on the web at www.connectedpeers.com.